abyss, kind of like the Apollo. Was it the Apollo where it was temporarily out of communication? Anyway, there's this building narrative and story about this beast in the pit, or the Kraken, and of course the destroyer. And this ties into Oppenheimer, where he talks about how he has become death, destroyer of worlds. Again, this is all kind of linking up here. And then someone sent this to me. This was posted on Twitter by Michael Letts, Michael in Truth. It's talking about this thing called the Pit in the Dark Knight trilogy. So here we get another, I brought up Oppenheimer. Well, here's another reference, same director here. We're talking about Dark Knight, Christopher Nolan. Quote, "There's a reason why this prison is the worst hell on earth. Every man who has rotted here over the centuries looked up to the light and imagined climbing so easy, so simple, and like a shipwrecked man turning to sea water from uncontrollable thirst, many have died trying." That's Bane, talking about this pit. Well, the pit is a prison located in the ancient part of the world which had established a fearsome reputation, and it became known as the worst hell on earth. It featured a well-like structure where prisoners were free to climb in an attempt to escape, and everyone who tried failed. Anyway, the story goes on to talk about how Bruce Wayne managed to escape, how Batman got out. And the way he got out was he found that you could only escape by using adrenaline to boost the human body's capability beyond the norm. And Bruce made the jump, and he did it without the rope because the fear of dying gave him the adrenaline he needed to make the leap. Now, my point to bringing this up is you have Batman in a pit, Batman escaping the pit. And the connection here is with the correlation between Donald Trump and the Batman. And the name Abaddon, another name for Apollyon, the beast in the pit, ties into Trump as Abaddon, who does have in Trump Tower a whole room dedicated to Apollo. And of course, his penthouse in his towers were actually used in the Devil's Advocate for the devil's actual office space. So what I'm pointing out here, though, is that there's just more building up here along this story of Donald Trump being correlated with this Antichrist, the beast from the pit. JL talks about this theme quite often. But the further connection here is Christopher Nolan, Batman. Christopher Nolan and Destroyer of Worlds. Of course, that's what Abaddon means, the destroyer. And of course, that movie has all the requisite connections to the number 11-6 or 611, which is also in the Batman movie when Gotham gets flooded. The Kraken is released on 11-6. Gotham goes underwater. It's the repeated theme here, and it all has to do with this thing rising up. And again, just this is another point that when Trump was brought in to be arrested, it was on Heath Ledger's The Joker's 44th birthday. This is fascinating. I mean, March 4th, Batman movie comes out. The Joker, the so-called Joker from the Boston bombing, has his death penalty reinstated. Here we have on 4/4, which we talked about the significance of it. I mean, Trump was referred to as Christ that entire week. As absurd as that sounds, he's the least Christ-like person I've ever seen, which makes it likely he is the Antichrist. But on Saturday Night Live, before his 4/4/2023 arraignment, they had this skit where Donald Trump was in front of the Last Supper. It was very blasphemous, I should say. Talked about how he was greater than Jesus. But the fascinating connection here again is simply that, oh, hey, yesterday was the release date of The Dark Knight, by the way. So I guess we're also looking at the anniversary of the Aurora shooting. But fascinatingly, it was Heath Ledger, the Joker's birthday, where Trump is being arraigned at the courthouse where the new Joker movie just happened to be filmed that day. Skill says, the new Barbie movie is toxic malevolence I'm trying to avoid. Yeah, I don't want to have to watch it for predictive programming. It looks unwatchable, but A. Woodward asks, is there any newer Mad Mike insights in the last 6 months? Well, on 2/22/2020, he attempted a mile-high launch for the Science Channel's TV program Homemade Astronauts.
COVID-19 84, COVID-19 84, COVID-19 84, COVID-19 84.
Okay, phones are open. 505-510-4226. The number is up on the screen. So if you want to call in, anything is on the table. I have a list of things to talk about today. And let me go ahead and see if we have any voicemails from last night. We got one from, I think it was a fake Klaus Schwab and the real Richie from Boston, or it was the fake Richie from Boston and the real Klaus Schwab. But let's see, we have another one from Echo Charlie asking if I still think Owen Schroyer is the QAnon shaman. You know, it's hard to say. You know, this is a movie-based reality. And I was just with a friend chatting about this Alex Stein beef with Steven Jackson, twin of George Floyd. And he's like, you can't be taking this seriously. And I'm like, well, not really. I'm just pointing out that this beef between Alex Stein and his mockery of George Floyd and how it has angered Steven Jackson, who has basically called for violence, is worth noting, especially in the context of that song, Try That in My Town, by Jason Aldean, who was the star of the Vegas PSYOP. And that's the song that suggests that if the BLM rioters went to a small town, they wouldn't get away with it. Which is true. You can have a peaceful protest in your Democrat, communist hellhole. Nobody cares. But the point of it is, they're saying this is like a provocation. So it's like, okay, wait, Jason Aldean, provocation. So I'm looking at Stein, and he's supposed to have a fight, some kind of a mixed martial arts thing, but he went to a press conference and he threw sausages at Mohammed Kuba, or Modine, the guy that he was going to fight. And because of this and Misfits Boxing not agreeing with the fight continuing, it's been pulled. Because, again, throwing pork at a Muslim. So I'm like, wait a minute here. Stein seems to be elevated at the moment in the spotlight for this type of this behavior, and that's what he does. He's a provocateur. And this thing with Steven Jackson could be contrived. Like, this could be fake. And remember, basketball players, nothing but actors. The guy's a crisis actor this whole time. You think he's suddenly going to turn real? Probably not. Flat Sabbath says the shaman is in jail. No, the shaman's out. Now he's the American shaman. He served his 43 months. It was probably going to be 42, but they changed it because we were noticing their patterns. And now he's selling merchandise and teaching courses on New Ageism and transcendence. It's a total act. The QAnon shaman is a Fed. He's the son of a Democrat judge. If you didn't know that. I mean, he's a voice actor. Most of you knew that. But he's the son of a Democrat judge, which is like, well, that seems almost kind of oxymoronic there. I mean, the judgment would be lacking, I would think, if you're going to team up with the state olatry on the left. But the sad thing is, it's kind of crept on over to the right, or maybe it was always there and I haven't noticed, but I can't find anywhere where people are, running for the power of the state. They're fighting over the levers of control. But back to this Alex Stein thing with the NBA player. I'm not sure what's going to happen with it, but this story of him being canceled in his fight just got announced about 40 minutes ago. So this is kind of breaking news. And you're probably going to hear more about it because he's, again, with the Blaze. But these are significant events, and they do tie in, again, to this Jason Aldean song trending on iTunes. Another topic, Donald Trump went at his, it wasn't a theater, it was at Bedminster. They have one of his bases where they were screening Sound of Freedom, and Trump was in the front row in between Jim Caviezel, the QAnoner. I spell Jim Caviezel with a Q, Jim Caviezel, and Tim Ballard, or possibly Paul Walker. It's all theater. That movie is based on a PSYOP to convince the QAnoners that it's real. And I'm not denying the existence of depravity and evil and violence and everything else, up to and including cannibalism. But the fact of it is, they're malappropriating people's instincts to protect children and channeling it into voting for Trump. Meanwhile, this agenda ultimately leads to microchipping your children. It's like, how is that going to sell to the anti-vaxxers? Well, I think they figured it out. This is all a big sales pitch. The marketing speaks volumes. The way that they're using reverse psychology, they don't want you to see it. If you go to the theater, they're going to put nanobots in your drinks. Like, they've really overhyped it, but they're hyping it even more, and they're turning this into a movement. This Save the Children movement. But the more I'm looking at it, in its proper context, I think you can just chalk it up to, this is blood libel reinvented. The adrenochrome thing, the stealing of children. Yeah, these are centuries old conspiracy theories. There's nothing new about it. They've just weaponized it for politics. The only conspiracy theory they can't weaponize for politics probably is flat Earth, except maybe as a pejorative. Pete Trippa says, basketball players, they might be actors, but they have to be damn good players. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm just saying, like, athletes, just like celebrities, are influencers. And when you reach a certain level of influence, you have some utility. But the more I look at sports, the more I realize they're entirely rigged and fake. Sorry to say, but it's pretty obvious. Like when, was it LeBron James broke the record with the 38 points. Let me go ahead and pull that article up. It's all rigged. If you don't know who Jake Gibson is, or Jake the A-hole, he's done a lot of work in this regard. And the thing is, I think it's pretty obvious at this point that we've made the case that when they employ these players in these psyops, there's no way it's just one or two. It's got to be the whole team. Like the whole Damar Hamlin thing. Those guys were all acting. It was terrible crisis acting. Oh yeah, LeBron James's 38 points breaks NBA's all-time scoring record. And if you remember, the big story was, it was just replete with 38s, like an ungodly number of 38s. Like he was 38 weeks old when the record was created, etc. I have a whole list of these things. Then you can look at the stuff on Gibson's channel, where he points out the use of magnetic gloves, microchips in footballs, magnetic goalposts. There are all these things right there at their disposal. And of course you have NDAs. But if you look at the way they catch these footballs and you compare it, it kind of shows you something here. McDirtywork says the Q Shaman was on Ryan Dawson and he looked way different. Yeah, he doesn't look like somebody who just spent 42 months in prison. It looks like he's been at some kind of military training camp or boot camp. He's gained a lot of weight. His website's very flashy. Like, there's a lot of money that goes into that, and I don't know what he does exactly other than consultations. So if you need a consultation from a shaman, the guy doesn't make any sense. It's incoherent. You got white power symbols combined with Native American shamanism, combined with American nationalism, combined with New Age Pleiadian aliens coming to bring us technology for a new age of light if we all just believe and click our heels together. It's New Age sewage. And it's an act. And it was an act from day one. He never went to jail. And they point that out as well. None of the January 6th prisoners, political prisoners, served any time. They were all feds. Like that one guy, Baked Alaska. He's like, oh, that guy over there, he's a fed, he's a fed. Yeah, that was creating the scapegoat story that Tucker Carlson is still selling. Tucker Carlson's like, yeah, if it wasn't for Epps, if it wasn't for this, is it Dave Epps or whatever? If it wasn't for this one guy provoking, the mob wouldn't have went into the Capitol. Nice scapegoat story, totally not believable. And now Tucker's getting sued over it. Yeah, aliens, says Pete Trippa. Exactly. Has anybody put the QAnon shaman on that History Channel meme? The aliens bro guy? Okay, continuing here. Oh yeah, Ray Epps. Yeah, Ray Epps being pointed at. Fed, fed, fed. And I'm like, no, look guys, that's a fed calling a fed, so you don't recognize that everybody there is a fed. So the people watching at home on TV think, uh-oh, there's a Fed there, and he's telling people to do bad things, and then they did it. It's his fault. And he didn't serve time. Okay, yesterday we talked about some of this stuff as well, like MAGA X, Marjorie Taylor Greene showing off. I think they're censored Hunter Biden photos. I found the uncensored version of the Hunter Biden laptop on Garrett Ziegler's Telegram page. Garrett Ziegler's with Marco Polo, and they're behind this massive smear operation on the Bidens, trying to convince the court of public opinion that they're a bad crime family. It's like, we already knew this. It's like, oh, they're corrupt. More evidence. But what does it even mean? It means nothing. This is all a distraction. It's all truth or chicken feed, where they have all the QAnoners who would have been, I don't know, rebelling against the evil empire, looking through some guy's dirty laptop computer, buying it in print, getting uncensored versions. And so I look at these uncensored ones, and this is where it gets sick. So Garrett Ziegler, the guy who's behind the whole laptop operation, he shares a picture of Hunter Biden having intercourse with a prostitute. Only he puts one of his political opponent's face on that woman. Now, the guy, I don't know his name. He's some senator. I didn't want to look at it too long. But what my point of it is, they are making porn to attack their enemies out of this person's laptop. So in other words, the MAGA is basically, they've delved into, well, they're pornographers. So I'm calling it MAGA X, and MTG was up there shamelessly sharing that stuff. They're like, no, we don't want your kids to see these books, but look at this. It's like, I think that there needs to be some standards, but there aren't any. Then I find out Richard Dawkins is a godless pedo apologist. In his book, The God Delusion, like page 350 to 353, nothing but apologism for child predation, saying, he actually makes the argument that it would be better to be molested than to be raised a Catholic. Sickening. And then he says he's a victim, but that it did no harm. Again, sick, unexpected. Just seems to be a topic these days. Another random topic, sphinxes showing up in Australia. It's like the new pyramids on Mars. I'll believe it when I see something to corroborate this picture that's going viral. Deep Thinking says, what are James Fetzer's best books, videos, or papers in your view? His book, Nobody Died at Sandy Hook. I suppose we didn't go to the moon either. Those are really good. Very fact-based. He took down the moon landing like nobody else. But he doesn't go into the space station. And I always wonder about this. I'm like, I need to talk to James Fetzer soon. And have a talk about the implications of the fake moon landing without adding this hypothetical secret space program. Because what you'll find is the professional moon debunkers don't debunk the whole space program. They say, oh, that was fake to trick the Russians. But the space station's real. Oh, really? You see how they do this? So this is what I consider to be a guardrail. You could talk about fake moon landing all day long. You don't challenge the status quo. You don't challenge the status quo until you mention the space station. The fake moon landing is actually a controlled opposition, limited hangout conspiracy, and it's hardly worth your time. The only evidence you really need is just to point out that there's no moon on any of the videos. Look at any of the videos with these astronauts hopping around, or the one with the remote control moon buggy, that little scale model toy, and you won't see the moonscape. There's no plain extending for miles with craters. You know, it's like you stop at night in the middle of the road at the side of a freeway and you look out at night, and it's basically a landscape. And there's no moonscape. And the moonscape would be there. As small as it is compared to the Earth, it's still huge from the perspective of a human being. And there are no moonscapes to speak of. There's simply an area that's the size of a 7-Eleven parking lot. Okay, joined here by Jennifer Reeves, Northern Girl, Tominoid 2, and Ollie Goering. He says, stinky floating aluminum cans for a space station. Yeah, I thought the Chinese space station was going to be better. Their graphics are worse. But I don't think they have the freedom of speech we do to criticize government, so they don't have to try as hard. Like that looks like it's made of Legos, and then they punish you for it. Over here, at least we can criticize these things. Maybe we help improve their product. Another good book by Jim Fetzer I would recommend is The Capstone Event. The Capstone Event, which slyly has David Hogg and Adam Lanza merged on the cover, and it got past their filters. It's a fictional version of Sandy Hook as it actually happened, as fake as it is. And it was turned into fiction because his book, Nobody Died at Sandy Hook, was censored. So I called him up and I said, hey, I saw your book was pulled off a Kindle. And he had sold like 500 copies right out the gate. That was going to be a bestseller. And I believe he lost his publisher over it even. It's really what they did to his publishing company is a travesty. All of his books are worth reading. But I called him up and I said, hey, I'm working with some writers. We're publishing fiction. We can use fiction to get past the filters, like a cipher. He agreed, and so we took his book and we ran it through some writers. Today we would have been using ChatGPT, created a fictional version of it just to make a point that there are ways to get through the filters. Portal Complex says, great book. Oh yeah, and at the time, yeah, you can call in if you want. Let me go, it's the number's on the screen, 505-510-4226. My basic rundown, I'm getting some indications here with Jason Aldean, Alex Stein, Steven Jackson that they may be hyping something up. Maybe some kind of action or some kind of response to these disrespects that people have leveled towards George Floyd and the BL movement. Again, the song Try That in a Small Town is very anti-BLM. MAGA X, the MAGA, you thought MAGA rap was bad? Wait until you see MAGA porn. In fact, MTG's in a MAGA rap video. If you look it up, it's pretty bad. It's with Horatio Blow. Although he's considered to be one of the best MAGA rappers. Steven Jackson, okay, we'll continue. Again, if you don't know who he is, that's the guy who's raising George Floyd's daughter. So that's why he's so personally offended by this, just for context. Because people have been joking on Floyd for some time, but Stein has a bigger footprint, and then Stein just got into that incident with the throwing pork at the Muslim. Very interesting. We're also talking about how the real agenda behind Sound of Freedom is to microchip your kids. And the whole story about trafficked children and adrenochrome is the blood libel fairy tale rebooted. It's all based on a selective interpretation of the facts, because the truth of it is intra-species predation is pretty widespread. It's not concentrated with this particular group. Unfortunately, I mean, it's not like you can just take the bad guys and put them in Guantanamo, chop their heads off and save the world. It's a nice idea, and that's what holds Q together. Yes, Jason Aldean performed at Route 91, has the Jack and Ace tattoo, which is 9-1, and his name, yeah, there's quite a lot there. His name, JA91. There were a lot of things about that event and the Harvest Festival that gave away that the whole thing was just fake. Happened in a paddock, a fenced-in area. Shooter, Stephen Paddock. The political utility of it was country music. They worship the Second Amendment, and now it comes back to haunt them. Taking it out of the schools and directly to where the people who are voting for guns are going to be affected by it. It was a terribly orchestrated and performed psyop, and the people on the ground said that the bullet sounded like they were coming from, well, there were sound effects coming from the speakers. Okay, 6079 says Steven Jackson is the creator of the Illuminati playing. Oh yes, the Illuminati card game is a Steven Jackson, big name in role-playing games. And you could look at this, it's an interesting connection, doesn't really mean anything other than similar, but the guy who invented role-playing games, well, what are you looking at with Q? You're actually looking at an alternate reality game. The Digital Soldiers, the one who get deep into it and they believe they're fighting the deep state by tweeting. Yeah, that's a game. They're being played. Yeah, phones are open if you want to call in on any of these topics or anything else that we've covered as of late. I've been assembling furniture all day, or shelving and stuff. I actually have taken everything that's on the floor, properly organized it. We have copies of books that are going to go up for sale, likely tonight. I have Creatures of the Infinite Plane, Volume 1 by our designer X-Pac. It's a coloring book. We've got a number of books by Micah Dank, who's done some great work. This is another example of fiction being used to tell the truth. He's got a series of books that deal with the theme of astrotheology. I have all of his books. I have half a dozen copies of the World Stage Deprogramming Guide, and I do have some remaining issues of the Fake World News that I just want to get out of here. But I'll be listing all of these things, and we're going to be having a constant stream of books arriving and exiting from this place because we are a publishing company. And I will probably pick up all of Fetzer's books and put those into my store as well. Okay, continuing. Back on Twitter clones. Okay, I was stalking one of my stalkers. And one of my favorite stalkers thinks that I'm Crow777 and that I'm also Kelly Weil from the Daily Beast. Thinks I'm like a triplet. In fact, their theory is that they have to have triplets to play me because of labor laws. I'm like, wow. So the Illuminati respects labor laws when it comes to their agents. It's a nice theory. She claims that I work with Linda Carter, the original Wonder Woman, who is playing the role of another Linda in our Discord server. Anyway, I usually just attribute her insane ramblings to toxoplasmosis. She's a crazy cat lady, and she's a writer who never leaves her house. She's also a big-time transvestigationist. All NFL players are women. All cheerleaders are men. And this goes for basketball as well, and it goes for me. So anyway, this person, Xmas Evil is the name. This person, her real name is James. So James has been stalking me for some time. And again, I don't care. I kind of got over it. I realized I was dealing with, somebody who's in their own world, very subjective. But I was just following up because they block me, so I have to open up new accounts. And so I'm searching for them with my new account. And I find another account that looks just like them. Only they literally used their avatar, which is this person's cat. They used the background, which is this person's dog. They copied and pasted the bio. Nothing was changed. And I thought, this is weird, because in this other account, she's not crazy. She's actually selling NFTs, and she's pushing crypto scams. And she's spamming the heck out of it, and she's heavily involved in programming. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not underestimating this stalker of mine when I say that there's no way this person could also be that person. There's no way they're dumbing it down that much. And so what I realized was some kind of bot scraped her data from Twitter, made a new account, and turned it into a spam account to push crypto and NFTs. So it's like, I'm thinking, wait, this is like imagine somebody cloning you on Twitter, and then suddenly you're being ratioed by yourself, and they're more popular than you. And this person has no protections because they're anonymous. You see, if you're anonymous, good luck trying to say, hey, they stole my likeness. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting here. It's like the robot wars continue. Someone's just being drowned out. Frank Castle says, where can I find these listings? Right now you can find them at timosmond.art. They're going on that eBay store. I sold about 450 paintings in the last 4 months, little baseball card size paintings, to elevate the store's ratings, to get rid of all the limitations. And now the store is fully operational, and I can get anything shipped within 24 hours, pretty much anywhere. And I do want to focus on print because we're taking a lot of this content and putting it into a tabloid. And the tabloid is going to be distributed through our press pass carriers. So we have a plan moving forward to kind of, and it's not that we're going analog, which is actually a step back. I'm not saying, put up wheat paste posters and get on a ham radio. Quite the opposite. These papers are going to be fully integrated with the internet, with clickable links, reciprocal links. You can read or listen to an interview. You can download a song. You can visit sites that we are posting these articles on. So it's meant to be integrated. And if the internet goes down, you would be able to use this to download the file. So I'm just thinking ahead here. Okay, and when it comes into publication, I have a plan as well, probably starting off with a monthly. But we do want to get more original reportage in here. So I'm working with what I'm calling the IPR deep dives, which are stories that are going to take a lot of time to fully flesh out, but we're mostly in the fact-finding stages. For example, there's a number of loose ends that I think could be investigated in person. I don't want to get too specific because we don't want to give any heads up, but we are assigning stories. Yeah, phones are open, 505-510-4226. Now, when you get the press pass, if you want to be a distributor for the papers, you're on the list, and I'll send out a notification, and we can work on exactly how we're going to how we're going to approach it. My plan is actually to have what I call the freemium version, where we have a truncated version that you give away for free, and they go online to order the full version. Very easy, inexpensive, and I think easy to standardize. Taking all the clues and all the best techniques I can from the best cults in the world. Jehovah's Witness is one that I'm looking at very closely. I mean, there's a time where you couldn't go to a laundromat without having to deal with some kind of Jehovah's Witness literature. And I used to read it just to study it for its marketing value and the techniques they use to distribute the stuff and how it actually works and to convert people. And I noticed, side note, Jehovah's Witness, which I know it's started by a Freemason and all that stuff, it's definitely based, I think, on wealthism or demonizing the rich and associating worldly power with the devil, and the devil runs the world. Fascinating spin-off cult. Now, I wonder if there's any elements of Jehovah's Witness built into Q, because Q's definitely got a healthy dose or an unhealthy dose of Seventh-day Adventism, which is why they're always waiting for JFK's return. And again, blood libel and the belief in, Satan and the need to be saved from sin. There's a very religious underpinning to all of this QAnon stuff. It's not new. It's actually it's almost like they took, like if you think of like a super virus, like in that book Inferno, like an engineered virus. This is an engineered belief system. I don't know if it's going to replace, it's kind of like the evangelicals, the evangelicalism, but it's more mixed with politics. So it still steers them all towards man as savior. And Trump is definitely their God. At first I thought it was a joke with the memes, but no, this is what you would call a cult of personality. And by the way, Trump's going to be arraigned, in a couple of days now? Which is why we're probably having a slow news week. Someone in Discord had commented things are kind of slow right now. And it's like, well, it's the calm before the storm. I know it's a cliche, but that's kind of what it seems like to me. Okay, so continuing, I was just mentioning Alex Stein, and his fight was canceled. If you didn't know, he was going to have a fight. Twitter clones. So the way you would search for your name to find out if you've been cloned is just search for your username, because they have to change the @ but your Twitter handle. But the name, I was searching for this person's name, and it just brought up like a bunch of them. And there were a couple that were hers, and then I found the clone. And I looked at the clone, and I thought, okay, this is wild. So I'm going to check to see if I've been cloned yet. I've certainly been censored on the Twitter. Now, this is a message I got from Mr. Trustworthy. Apparently, Ice Cube used the word guardrail. Listen to this. His use of the word guardrail in his recent Bill Maher interview about gatekeepers and how Ice Cube's, quote, not in the club. Sure, Ice Cube, famous superstar since the 80s, probably owns stock in the club. I heard a clip of him talking on Dane Calloway's show, and I'm trying to find this timestamp, but his use of the phrase guardrail or the word guardrail was used how you invented it to be used. The club is stealing it. Yeah, they're co-opting it. They've already co-opted PSYOP. They've already co-opted fake. It wouldn't surprise me at all if they're trying to take our best terminology. And if you don't know what that means, guardrail, it's kind of like this. We're on the information superhighway or misinformation superhighway. You see something's wrong, something's glitchy, something doesn't add up. So you start trying to get off the information superhighway. And as you get towards the edge, you hit a guardrail. You get something that bumps you back onto the main road or keeps you from going all the way off. Like, oh yeah, there's a reason why it doesn't add up to you, and here's why. And their here's why explanation is just an alternate explanation to pacify you. You know, the red pills aren't really red pills necessarily. I mean, they're not really things that wake people up. It's sort of like a pacification operation. Because the way I see it, you know, the world stage is the filtered worldview that most people accept, and if they don't disagree with it, if they don't question it, you know, they're effectively dreaming, and you would call them blue pillars. It's this matrix analogy, but the idea that someone would wake up from the dream and break the matrix is always a threat. So what they've done is they've put out a number of alternative and satisfying explanations to keep you from leaving altogether. But these explanations are a little frightening and scary and paranoid, so it turns your dream into a nightmare. And if you're really into it, you become an activist and you work to wake up more dreamers. And so this creates the false red versus blue dialectic, where it's dreamers versus dreamers. Same thing with the woke. The woke aren't any different from the dreamers, other than they don't buy the official story, but their version is just a scarier version of the normal story. And their job is to wake them up, to make everyone else woke, to spread their mind virus. G33 says, I'm lost. Are we live? Yes, we are live. And the phone's on the screen if you want to call. Portal Complex says, Ice Cube is dope. AJ206 says, holy mackerel. He listens to IPR. Possibly, or I don't know how this works. When they steal ideas, when they appropriate memes, how does the Ministry of Truth gain their intel? Are they getting our transcripts and analyzing it? Truth Hurts 21 says the red pills in the Matrix was just another false reality. Interesting. Yeah, well, it's a pacification and it works for most people. And what I'm looking at is I'm looking at individual red pills. And I'm kind of thinking, okay, well, the good thing about this is the people who are looking at in this area, at least they're not fully going with the program. But I think they need to be reverse engineered. And I've been fighting with people over needles and chemtrails and is Hunter Biden a man or a woman? Or are gorillas fake? And you might think these are pointless discussions, or Mandela effects. A lot of people have Mandela effect fatigue, and you should. But behind every one of these false explanations is a path that you took to accept it. And when you go back down that path, you can find, okay, this is where I went wrong. When somebody said this or that, Jif or Jiffy, well, they were offering you a binary. And that question should have been rejected. Because if reality is shifting, why would we assume it could only shift in one way? The one that everyone sees, or this alternative? If it were really reality fluid, there would be many versions. There'd be as many versions of reality as there are genders now. Seek Lloyd says, you've been saying Alex Jones is a guardrail for years. Oh, he's one of the primary. See, the thing is, Alex Jones will keep you focused on a tree at a time. And you might see the whole forest over the course of the years, but you never see it at once. It's always one tree at a time. You never see the big picture. You never get the off-world stage perspective. And that's where we are. That's the perspective I'm going from. And that's why the Daily Beast said that the Infinite Plane Society is the information equivalent of clear-cutting a forest. And it's true. But what they call information, we have determined to be misinformation. And we are cutting it down, and then you just, build back better, as they say. But the thing with, like, Sandy Hook, for example, they made a big stink about Sandy Hook. Alex Jones is being hit with, $3.3 trillion and something he'll never pay. And they bring out the cast from the Sandy Hook thing, and they all talk about it, how bad it was, that nobody believes it was real. Meanwhile, 50 other fake school shootings go by. No commentary. All of them eminently debunkable. Again, like I said, You focus on this one tree, this one psyop, and people miss there's a psychological war. It's the perpetual war that Orwell wrote about. Truth Hurts says Jones was promoting Sound of Freedom and now is questioning the funding after he got a download. Yeah, all of a sudden, right? Like Tucker Carlson's like, that's not a Q movie. If you want to interpret that, you only have one or two options. Either Tucker doesn't know, which means he's woefully uninformed and he's not willing to even do a little bit of research, or he's lying to gullible people like the QAnoners who have never found a Ponzi scheme they won't sign up for. I mean, Q is ultimately a Ponzi scheme. And the reason why they won't leave, they invested all their social capital. And they're waiting for the Great Awakening when they all get a payout. And they've attached their egos to the success of Trump in a lot of ways. And this next staged event or election is everything. Now they can finally save the kids. It's like, now? Like, this was the story 8 years ago. I mean, come on. They're all going to be voting Democrat. They grew up with their Democrat handlers. AJ206 says, is McMedia still a company after that woman interviewed you? I haven't followed up. If you haven't seen that interview with McMedia, I'm putting it in that upcoming video/documentary project I'm working on, and I'll find the whole 45-minute interview because there are some clips in there that need to be heard. She worked with Huffington Post. She interviewed me about auto hoaxing versus the auto believer. And after the interview, she ran it by a psychiatrist who said that I was anti-authoritarian, that I was probably angry, and what else was, she had all these problems that I had that made me not believe the news. Oh, that it's just too hard for me to accept. It's like I was moving corpses for a living for the state morgue. You think I'm shocked by things on the news that are fake to me? That I'm in denial of the essential, facts of life, that people die? No. In fact, my experience in the death care profession has made it easy for me to see the falseness of these reconstructions and these simulations. But they had a psychiatrist on there just to say mean things about me. And we look into the psychiatrist. It turns out she's the sister of somebody who works at the Hubble telescope. So we got some NASA influence there. I thought that's interesting. And that video itself, they scrapped it. They buried it. I found it, and they put it. You know how you have these video players on these websites that play when you log on to their site? They put it on this article about some meth addict who insisted that reptilians were after him. And I'm like, wait a minute here. You just go to this page, McMedia, and you see this article about this meth head and reptilians, and then there's me on the bottom talking. And I'm like, yeah, that's fake. Dinosaurs are fake. Terrorism's fake. And I'm like, holy crap, these people are vicious. Demetria 101 says, my first car was a hearse. Very roomy. It's basically a limousine. I mean, they're nice vehicles. I've driven a number of them. My last funeral home gig was delivering flowers to the gravesites out in Ventura. And then I'd take the vehicles, the hearses, to the car washes. Okay, let me see what's going on in the comments. Truth Hurts 21 says, the popular Homestead channel is questioning it, but they're attached to the false Great Awakening. Well, it's interesting how it was sold as like this. I think they're trying to reboot Q. I mean, it was meant to come out years ago. It was meant to come out 5 years ago. Think about the impact it would have had 5 years ago. It would have mattered. It would have lent credence to this idea that there were children underneath, underground being rescued. And this thing is called Operation Underground Railroad, like Underground Railroad, Hour. Joined by Pete Shea, who believes that we live on the back of a giant dodo bird. Am I getting your model right? You got to refresh me. If you don't know, there's like a number of flat Earth models that were viciously fought over. There's a lot of contention there. You had the domed flat Earth floating in space. You had the domed flat earth where it was biblical and they didn't mention what was outside of it. Then you had the hollow earth, which is like a ball that's hollow on the inside, like a golf ball, but you're on the inside. Then you have cell earth, where the earth is this one's sort of complicated because in the hollow earth there's another sun inside of the earth. In cell earth, the sun and moon we see are actually in the center of this hollow that we live within. That's the concave is what they call it. Concave earth or cell earth. Then you have the one that I wouldn't even call it a model, because I think it's premature to have a model. If you don't accept the globe, or you don't accept NASA's interpretation, if you agree that they're lying about something, what are you left with? Do you have to default to any of these alternative models? No, you don't. It's the same thing when you find out the news is lying. Do you have to go to somebody else's repackaged version of it? Absolutely not. Suspending judgment is an essential part of the auto hoax methodology. Recognizing I don't have enough information. Suspending judgment, though, makes it impossible for you to be manipulated. If they can't get you in the moment when you're having some kind of emotional resonance with some crisis actor, if you wait, it's too late. In fact, I saw this tweet today where some people were overreacting from a really nice, and it was a Nice PSYOP. A real nice example of a fake PSYOP. It was like these rubber dummies being dumped out of a truck. And it's like, no, the truck ran over those people, they were saying. You could see on the cell phone video. But no, it was pretty obviously a sneaky tactic where they make it look like a truck attack, they film it as a truck attack, but they're really just deploying a bunch of dummies. And I see this on Twitter. And taken out of context, just playing the clip, it can look real. And I see people overreacting to it. And I have to go in there and I have to say, this is fake, this is fake, this is fake. And they want evidence, so I got to go dig it up. This is why we need to have an archive of the breakdown of every single one of these PSYOPs, because a lot of people, it's not that they're lazy, but that the information is just not as accessible as it should be. You know, the censorship is that rampant to where the right information isn't even in their frame of reference. Everything is a whodunit. Like there are people who think, well, most people still think that January 6th was 100% real, but it was instigated. That's the guardrail. You have you have the mainstream version. It happened as reported by CNN. Then you have the Fox version. It happened because agent provocateurs who are liberal feds and Antifas made it happen. But neither of those interpretations include the possibility that the whole thing was a PSYOP. Truth Hurt says, how about the new TikTok NPC live streamers? I watched a few seconds of one. If you don't know what this is, it's look, a lot of people are ripping on it, but it's no different than mimes, like mimery. You know those mimes with their costumes and they pretend like they're in a glass box? It's a performance art. Well, there's a new trend of people pretending to be NPCs, which are characters, background characters in games, who go through a series of repetitive motions and they respond in repetitive ways. And so they will sit there on a live stream and pretend to be an NPC for the enjoyment of the viewers who interact with this person pretending to be an NPC. And I saw one person doing it, according to the article, and she was making, I think it was it $4,000 a day from signups? $7,000 a day for pretending to be NPCs. The NPC TikTok trend explained. So Pinky Doll, $7,000 a day for 5 catchphrases, like ice cream so good. Truth Hurt says at least they're not on OnlyFans. There's probably going to be some crossovers, but no, actually there's probably more money with this because this isn't some, closed thing. This is actually like live stream tips. Ollie Goering says fighting AI by role-playing as AI. Yeah, replicants, right? I see nothing wrong with it in other than the fact that it's just outwardly bizarre and the amount of money is egregious, but This says something about where money's going with the attention economy and why they want to fight so hard to hold your attention. Because if you weren't throwing money at her, you'd be throwing the money at something else. And they would probably prefer that you're putting the money towards probably some agenda, some politician, some crisis actor's pay. Is today National Hot Dog Day? I saw this video with Mitt Romney talking about how hot dog is his favorite food. I'm looking it up really quick. July 19th, so that was yesterday. Yeah, yesterday, Mitt Romney's cringe video celebrating Hot Dog Day goes viral. Well, everybody knows what he's really talking about, right? Isn't that all code? Pizza and hot dogs, Pizzagate. It's got to be some kind of humiliation ritual. Look, I don't believe any of that stuff. But given that probably 50 million people in the world think that hot dog and pizza are codes, I wouldn't be seen on video eating it, any of these things, even if I wanted to. I just wouldn't, because it would be misconstrued. You know how the internet works. It's like, oh, this guy likes adrenochrome. This actually happened to me. I was drinking a blood orange smoothie that I picked up at the store. Blood orange was the flavor. So someone named Cunify, who I think turned out to be a big Q member, Cunify was like blood orange. Orange is 33. He's a Freemason. Blood, he drinks blood. So there you had it. All the proof they needed that I am a blood drinking vampire because I drank a smoothie. Pete Shea says, remember concave earther Lord Stephen Christ was in prison for threatening Obama. Pop quiz, how many months? Ooh, good one. Good one. Pete Shea knows the game here. We have these pop quizzes all the time. I'll give you a hint. The number of months that Lord Stephen Christ was in jail after threatening to kill Obama is the same number of years that Joseph Smith, Dave Koresh, and Mohammed Atta died. Yep, 33 months. 33 months. And then he got out, and he and I kind of became friends for a little while. Lord Stephen Christ, he believed that the earth was inside, that we were inside of the earth, and that the sun and the moon were in the center of it. But again, concave earth, kind of, he was the only one doing it. He came up with these graphics that were somewhat convincing. It had some problems. It requires quite a lot of you to believe in it. I mean, I don't know. I never took it all that seriously because he believed that he was also Christ and that he was going to decapitate, or the word he used, decapitize his enemies. But after he got out of jail, he kind of cleaned up, he did his YouTube thing, he threatened to go after Trump. And then they arrested him again. And then he came out, and then I think he died. Tim and Vic 131, thank you for joining. I didn't send out archives last night because every single YouTube download video site has been shut down. Just like Musk making it so you can't look at Twitter unless you have an account to stop scraping, or so he says. I think it's just to close an open system, just to preempt it. Let's go ahead and close it, and eventually we will shrink the universe of ideas, but we want to preempt anybody really tapping into the potential for what they could do with it. I still have plans for Twitter. I think there's still some potential, but they're destroying it. Not as bad as YouTube again, which you can't take a video off YouTube. I cannot download my own videos. It's insane. By design. Okay, phones are open, 505-510-4226. I was checking my voicemails to see if I had missed anything. And I had mostly... Okay, here we go. I don't really vet my messages, and I want to make sure I only find quality messages and not junk mail. Okay, here we go. Let's see what this one is about. This is...
Hey Tim, this is Armun. I'm calling as you asked in the replay of your live yesterday to arrange something on Skype. If I
Oh, Skype. Okay, yes. I'll turn Skype back on. For those of you who can't call the number here, I'll turn Skype on. We have that capability. We may even do Zoom as well. So I'll leave that open. I'm still looking for a new phone system. I haven't decided on the new 800 number yet. So we're just using the Google phone number on the screen. A couple of the topics we've covered tonight. Trump's going to jail in a couple of days. I think that's when things are going to get a little more interesting. Kind of following to see if anything happens with this beef between Stein and George Floyd's twin. Very questionable all around, but Alex Stein being something of a provocateur, this would fit right up there with Jason Aldean and his anti-BLM anthem trending. The underlying meaning behind the sound of freedom might be chip your kids. Another thing to look at, and I want to see if this blows up in anybody's faces. Any of these big channels promoting sound of freedom, are they going to have to end up explaining what a colossal fraud the whole thing is probably likely to be? What's up, G33 says, are we live? Yes, we are. We're going to be live pretty much the same time. If you get on the newsletter, you'll get the notification. Just go to ips.monster, sign up, and I'll send notifications and archives. Lots of things, though, to go over here. I was just talking about the need to suspend judgment, talking about really the approach of auto hoaxing in general and how it separates what we do from mainstream and alternative media occupying the same ecosystem. Donnie of the Dead says, nice to see you back on Apple Podcasts and a schedule. Hope to tune in soon. Yes, you can find us on a number of podcast sites. Just go to, again, ips.live. Christopher Nolan's brother Matthew is a hitman currently in prison. Woody Harrelson's dad is also a hitman. This is a tweet from Owen Benjamin. It's pretty interesting to see how many Hollywood people have confirmed murderers in their families. I don't have any conclusions, I just found it interesting. I introduced Christopher Nolan once at an award show. He's clearly a great director, but what is up with the murderer brother? Interesting. I saw that tweet, and I thought that's kind of interesting. And Woody Harrelson, another interesting connection. I don't have any information about that here, but Christopher Nolan has been someone we've been discussing lately because of Oppenheimer, which I'm going to have to go see. Have any of you seen it yet? Because someone had shared a screen cap, and it shows the Oppenheimer character wearing a badge that says K6, which would be 116, and the number 116 has everything to do with the nuke, as I had been pointing out. Oh yes, G33, I will be sending out texts again soon. It's one of these expenses that I want to kind of cut down on by instead having a regular schedule. The text alerts were extremely helpful when I was kind of nomadic, but the IPS morning deprogram is going to be a regular feature early in the mornings, and the phones will be pretty much in the same window, 7 to 10 p.m. Mountain Time. But I'm also going to have the live stream 24/7 replays starting up here very soon. I might kick it back on tonight. I've been running some tests. I might need to update some things, but everything's falling into place pretty rapidly. And anything that I haven't totally locked down in the next couple of weeks, I think I'll be able to manifest through something that I have a plan. We'll just leave it at that. But the main important thing here is we have a base of operations, and I have a number of projects that I want to bring back up to the foreground here. I mean, South Pole, Season 1, Season 2, Season 3, I think these were some very successful pilots. But I have some plans for using the same techniques, the same animation, but for shorter productions. We kind of tested this out. We did a skit. It was a cartoon where it was Candace Owen and Ye went to the pillow guy to strike a deal to have the Pillow Man's pillowcases turned into Klan hoods with swastikas on them for Ye's clothing company. And Candace Owen was kind of making the deal happen. And it was a pretty good skit, and it was about 5 minutes long. Well, anyway, TikTok pulled it, and I realized, you know what? We have to overcome this infrastructure that is just designed to bounce anything we do off its walls before we can really put all of our time and energy into these projects. And so that's what I'm looking forward to, having the foundation to really build our projects. Into the Break says, it's sick and depraved what McToon and Fight the Flat Earth do. Katz bowed out, but he still condoned that depravity. Characters like McToon and Fight the Flat Earth are depraved, and that's why Katz left. They send out... Oh, interesting. I don't know too much about what they do beyond regurgitate really bad arguments and attack a straw man type of... Like, the irony of it all is this. They attacked the straw man, quote, flat earther, just because someone finds discrepancies that ought to be looked at and taken seriously. Like, I'm a video editor and I've done it for a long time. I can't not see a green screen glitch because to me, to my eyes, I'm thinking I couldn't sell this. If a client wanted a commercial made and it had this flaw in it, they would get their money back. Like NASA, I want my money back for everything from Apollo on up, especially for the ISS. I mean, but I guess my point of it is they attack this model that doesn't really exist. It's a straw man, this specifically the domed flat Earth. They love attacking this idea that the Earth is a flat dome and the flat earthers don't care about what's beyond it and they want to reject science because that's not really how it is. And the irony of it is that the people who are living in a very constrained world, who are afraid of the edge or who live in this blinkered reality, are actually the mainstreamers, the ones who aren't asking the questions. And I'm not saying all people who question establishment science are necessarily better off. I think you have to know both sides. But the Fight the Flat Earth and the McToons of the world don't possess the objectivity to look at both sides. And I see it all the time in their arguments. And their arguments have to adjust at times. They move the goalposts consistently. And they never account for it. But I think these are all worth exploring, and the flat earth topic is fascinating to me, simply on the fact that most people have their go-to answers. Like, I know we're on a ball. I've seen boats go over the horizon. And you tell them they don't, that it's the angular resolution in their eyes, and that a P900 would reveal that they didn't go over. That alone should be psychologically jarring and cause them to reconsider their assumptions about whether they have physically perceived the curve. Because if you take that out of the equation, now you've never seen the curve, you just believe in it. You're no longer a curve knower, you're a curve believer. Now, if they continue to lie and say they see the curve, they are curverts. They're bending the truth. They're twisting it. My point is that you have believers and knowers. And what we're doing here with this level of media deconstruction is we are attempting to know because we know it's knowable. We don't get mystified by these false explanations. And I'm not running with something I don't know to be true and then cudgeling people with it. Because that's what religions do. And mass media is the biggest religion of the day. I was listening to Tim Pool's podcast today, and they were talking about how environmentalism is a religion. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. They're figuring this out. About how there was a void where traditional religions were, and it's been filled by secular cults. And they're absolutely right. The thing is, it's like, okay, well, you're like 5 years behind us, but you're slightly getting there. But until you realize that NASA and the space program is at the top of the cult, that this is the heaven program, that the religious paradigm is a salvation paradigm top to bottom. But this is what I mean about Jones and the forest and the trees. Until you look at the big picture, you can never really exit their game. You know, like in that movie War Games, the intro or the catch line, the only winning move is not to play. That's kind of how I feel about the red pill versus blue pill. They're both losing. They're both lost in subjectivity. Osher says 3.3 years behind the beak. Oh yeah, easily. We were making some great progress. See, I would contend that we are living in an endarkenment, like the opposite of an enlightenment, that things aren't being revealed. Quite the opposite. We're being blinkered in with false explanations, and it's all by design. And it's rather diabolical and nefarious, I think. It's a new dark age, but it's a high-tech dark age going into our matrix pods. And I think one of the ways the system protects itself from people who see through it adequately is they rely on plants to constantly distract, to constantly put groups of truthers against each other. So that's like, okay, we're all united on the fact that we know the moon landing's bullshit, but now we're going to fight over whether it's the biblical flat earth or it's the enclosed system designed by some matrix simulation god. I mean, these people have these different theories where Mark Sargent is a shill and these religious people are very exclusive. Then you have Jehovah's terrarium. Nobody agreed because they all wanted to have their own little version of it validated. And to me, it's like we don't have enough information. G33 says, I respect any skepticism. I'm worried about the next shoe to drop. Well, I'm doing some research into the origins of skepticism, and it seems to me that the principle behind skepticism was the withholding of judgment until you have facts, and the avoidance of emotionally attaching oneself, and how the end result of emotionally being disentangled from events you know nothing about, in other words, reacting in advance, is a state of quiescence. I think it was Abraham Lincoln who said, those who fear before it is necessary fear more than is necessary. And think about it in the aggregate. If you spent the last 30 years wringing your hands about nukes, and then you find out they're fake, it's like, well, look at all that loosh that you just fed into the system. You can't get that back. I don't think you can get it back. I think you can just stop feeding it. It's a vampire. Honestly, it's a vampiric system. Have you heard the expression psychic vampire? It's like a new age thing, and I've seen it in some self-help stuff, but it's like this idea that there is some kind of energetic extraction between people, and negative people take. That negative people drain. And I think there might be something to it. There must be something to it. I don't have it all figured out, but there's a dynamic at play there. And I believe the dynamic at play is also at play in religions, which are also soul-sucking vampires. And the mainstream media is, again, a soul-sucking vampire. Rocco Calzone says, 26.7 billion year old space age is a sneaky 33. Oh, 26 plus 7. Not bad. I was trying to figure this one out too. I was like, well, maybe it's the 26,000 year precession of, the equinox completes the circle, the precession of the equinox. Perhaps there's a correlation there, but I think you might have nailed it. It's definitely that. Definitely a sneaky 33. As sneaky as a slice of chorizo plastered against some stars and presented to a bunch of space cadets as proof that space is real. And of course, they all believe it. Well, look, the mass media is obviously an emotional manipulator. They use all the tactics of marketing. And you can look at Netflix as the perfect example of what happens when you employ the best of perception management and propaganda with deep knowledge about man's subconscious. Look at the founders of Netflix, first CEO, co-founder, blood relative of Sigmund Freud and Edward Bernays. That says it all right there. Okay, let's continue here. Going through my notes. Newsbenders was in my notes. I'm putting together a list of things that everybody needs to watch. Like, I don't know if everybody watched In the Mouth of Madness. I happen to think it's one of the best movies that I've ever seen. John Carpenter, They Live. We all can agree They Live was a documentary. Well, In the Mouth of Madness describes how media works, how the hijacking of the collective consciousness and dreaming mind, the imagination, is a great source of power and might even be the ultimate source of all power. That there is some sort of hijacking of your life force, and that it's done through mediation, through the tapping into your subconscious. And the In the Mouth of Madness, I think, really kind of explains it in the form of an author whose books spread, as they describe it, like a pandemic, like a mind virus takes over people. And you might think, oh, this is science fiction. No, actually, that's how every single religion has spread. People get radicalized by some literature, and they kill the people who don't like the same book. Well, now it's you kill the people who don't like the same channel, or who don't go to the same websites. Just a reminder, you can leave voicemails at 505-510-4226. Like if you're Mandela affected. Let's say you wake up 3 a.m., can't sleep, you got a Mandela effect. Just call, leave a message, and then I will disabuse you of that effect the following day. I generally can respond within 24 hours to any critical Mandela effect. If you feel like your reality is falling apart, if you need to be boosted, if you need your Mind War inoculations boosted, just tune in infiniteplane.live 24/7, and I'll be updating the archives with more recent material and a whole lot of throwbacks. Russell DeBird has joined us. You know, I was actually just thinking about you the other day. If you want to call in, the number's on the screen. Russell DeBird with FE Radio. He says, what was the name of the author again? The author, which book had I just referenced? Which one? And I will answer your question. Yeah, if you want to call in, narwhals affected all the time. Can I call in? Yes. Number is on the screen. G33 says Alex Jones says They Live is a documentary. Yeah, it certainly is. And there's another movie that came out recently. Yeah, Carpenter, JC, John Carpenter. There's another movie, let me think, Free Guy with Ryan Reynolds. Free Guy is kind of a They Live reboot in a lot of ways. It even uses the same device, the glasses that you put on to wake up. Only it's from the movie of a simulation character, an NPC. And the NPC becomes sentient when he puts on the glasses. Very similar. Oh, In the Mouth of Madness is a movie, John Carpenter. You can find it for free on YouTube. Russell DeBird. And it's based on, in many ways, H.P. Lovecraft's fiction. In fact, it's just replete with Lovecraft references. And Lovecraft is huge in our world paradigm, whether you recognize this or not, or know it or not, because our modern paradigm is based on science fiction. And one of the original sci-fi authors that really delved into the horrors of deep space and alien invasions and telepathic invasions and mind parasites was H.P. Lovecraft. And then his whole mythos has the usual symbolism, the Elohim, the El, or the aliens, the elder gods, who came from the sky, and they landed at Point Nemo in the middle of the ocean, the pole of inaccessibility, the place most distant from any human habitation. And this is the place where the gods reside, in the abyss, the dead city. And this is all interesting considering the submersible and the abyss where the Titanic is, and then Titans, elder gods, old ones. It's all in there. Point Nemo, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, another sci-fi tie-in, Jules Verne, really first person to conceptualize the moon landing, Jules Verne. I think Pete Shea said something about Jules Verne, his dream realized by Wernher von Braun. Kind of an interesting connection there. But that's also the place where NASA dumps its spent satellites. So when a satellite is used up, runs out of gas or whatever, they say they drop it there, which is ridiculous. But what are the odds? Spacecraft Cemetery, City of Dead Gods from Lovecraft, and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Roxy W says, I saw 3 Days, Condor in the Mouth on your recommendation, Tim. Have you read Pontypool Changes Everything? Have not. If you want to put a link in the server or put a link here, I'll definitely check it out. I've been trying to catch up on a lot of movies as well. I was watching Bird Box Barcelona, which is, it's just, fear porn. The symbolism is all there. I need to continue watching it because I think it might have some kind of tie-in to anti-vaxxers, like the ones who don't want to wear the masks. But do I want to watch basically predictive programming for 2020? Like 5 years after the fact? Not really. Like most of the movies though, and this is a pattern I've observed, have included toxic airborne events and masks. Every movie. There's a movie out right now called Black Knight, just like Mad Max, but instead of gasoline, it's oxygen. And they have these Black Knights who deliver oxygen like Uber drivers so you can breathe, because we can't breathe, because capitalism polluted the skies. But every movie I see, I'm watching one right now called Katla. It's about a volcano, and it's ashes causing people to come back from the dead. Interesting series, but the whole point of it is they're in this town where the skies are always full of ash and everybody wears masks. So like masks are just ubiquitous, but these aren't the masks from 2020. These are the ones with the canisters. These are the ones for radioactive fallout. So we're already seeing the stage changing its costumes in preparation for the next phase. Like PPE. We were prepared for PPE through all kinds of virus movies leading up to 2020. Specifically in the months leading up to Wuhan. There was like a documentary on Netflix about it. It was called Pandemic. Jamitra 101 says, first person to get a Pfizer shot was wearing a penguin on her shirt. That's right. And Dr. Fauci with his penguin mask. Yeah, there's been a number of seemingly targeted appropriations of our mascot. Maybe sending a message. We are the only ones that have it right and have from day one. I mean, think about that. They know they're playing the multitudes. They know they're playing the counter narrative and all the antis. So like, yeah, we control the vaxies, the vax junkies over here, and we control the antis. But we don't control that little contingent, that little raft over there. Glenn Bush says, hello, sir, listening and working. Good to hear from you. Grandson loved his painting, by the way. Thanks again. Oh, well, thanks for supporting my art. I was actually trying to raise money for a few things, and I sold a bunch of Penguinotti, a little baseball card size or Pokemon sized paintings of penguins. I was trying to use more of an expression, a bit more expressionistic. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hello?
Hey, what's up, caller? How are you?
Not bad. How are you doing?
Very, very good. What topic has piqued your interest tonight?
Oh, I was just interested in the vaccine. I feel like the vaccines, people that are getting it, I want to go on that topic a little bit because I feel like they could be manipulated by the government into like getting the following orders, kind of like Revenge of the Sith, like Star Wars, like Order 66.
Okay, wait, what was that?
Something.
What was Order 66, if you could refresh my memory?
Alright, so Order 66 was like pretty much the Emperor, Palpatine, he pretty much says his order, and all the clones have a chip in their head, and they're all ordered to kill all the Jedi. So I feel like the vaccine is something like that with the 5G towers they're putting up and all the, I'm sure like I watched the other podcast about the 5G towers, the guy that drove into the Verizon 5G and exploded this job and was telling everyone to get out of the way. I feel like something like that, 5G, controls the vaccines because it messes with the DNA and it could potentially like tell people to do stuff that they don't want to do, but they got the vaccine, so that.
Okay, interesting what you're bringing up here. I used to listen to or read a book. It was a book called Psychic Dictatorship, Alex Constantine. And so I've listened to a lot of people talk about this idea of like remote mind control. There was this Dr. Jose Delgado who supposedly was able to control a donkey with some kind of hardware in its head, but it was basically manipulating its pleasure, I guess, reception in the brain and just causing it to like a remote controlled donkey. And at the time, I remember saying at the time they could do this voice to skull. And is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, pretty much. That's what I'm suggesting. I think I know exactly. Like I read a book. I think I read the same book or watched something. Or in the movie. Have you ever watched the movie They Live?
Yes. In fact, I just referenced They Live and In the Mouth of Madness, both John Carpenter. And yeah, with They Live, they have it's a tower, right?
Yep.
Okay, so it's a tower, and it's like got everybody under control, and then if he takes down the tower, it breaks the signal. That's what it is?
Yeah, that's pretty much what it is, yeah. And like, if you wear the glasses, you can see behind people's faces, pretty much.
Okay, well, interesting concepts, and appreciate the call very much. I think I have a slight echo, so I'm going to test it out, but we'll continue to talk about this and call back anytime.
All right, thank you. I'll see you, man.
Okay. Appreciate the phone call. You know, I kind of remember addressing this back in 2020. And what I said then, which I think is still valid, is that you don't necessarily need any kind of hardware or any kind of advanced technology to control people's minds today. You just need peer pressure. You just need the TV, and mind viruses suffice. Marketing suffices. People will line up and fall off a cliff. No need for 5G towers. But they are looking very ominous these days. There happens to be one right outside my window. And someone the other day was saying they believe that they will be used to ignite the skies. They said it'll be similar to putting aluminum in a microwave when they turn on the towers and light up the aluminum they put in the sky through years and years and years of geoengineering and chemtrails. The skies lighting up, burning up, sounds like fantasy. And yet, it's still something that I hear going around by people who don't believe in nukes. This is why I think it's important to look at some of the white pills very seriously. Now, I do endorse white pills. I don't endorse red. White pills are just things that are good news to find out about. Like, for example, nukes are fake. That's an obvious white pill. And the purpose to bringing these up is simply that if something isn't real, it's actually good news. It's not a possibility. But I think that there's always this desire by the power elite when they set up their paradigm that you always believe that at any moment they can hit a switch and we will all die. All of us. All at once. Whether it be, I guess, nukes or maybe alien invasion or maybe some kind of... there's always something where all at once everything can end. And 5G is just like the latest iteration of this. G33 says synchronicity is real, maybe. Yeah, I think synchronicity is really the biggest clue about this whole place. And it's very perplexing because you have the patterning in the media and the predictive programming and the seeming fulfillment of prophecy on a regular basis, which looks like synchronicity. It looks like it's just happenstance, that it's perhaps some kind of higher power. But I try to default to man did it until proven otherwise. But then there's the personal experience of synchronicity, which is too subjective to be considered a science. However, I think there's enough of a body of information about it and people making observations overall that it's a very common phenomenon. And it's unlike any other, quote, mystic phenomenon that I can point to, because it's really not fakeable. But it's very reliant on a confluence of things happening at the right time and place and then corresponding with whatever the experiencer happened to be thinking about at the time. I mean, it's fascinating. And I think it's overlooked as a point of, like, I think Mandela effect is wasting time that would be better devoted toward synchronicity. G33 says the Talmud allegedly says the best way to compromise a subject is sexually. I haven't read that, but it wouldn't be only in the Talmud. I mean, that's fairly well known in common sense. Do we have compromised politicians? Obviously. Look at the America First. Look at Nick Fuentes' clique and Ollie Alexander. The ones who wear the shirts that say Jesus is King. Yeah, they're all part of this club where you don't get in unless you send Ollie a picture of your the eggplant emoji, whatever's behind that, and then you get into their club. And they've been doing this for a long time. So not only are they grooming people and getting them into the cult, but they're all mutually blackmailed. Supposedly, they've got some material on MTG, and I don't know why that's not a bigger deal. If you have compromising material on a sitting U.S. representative, somebody should be talking to you. But nope, nobody's saying anything. Wonder why. It's because it's a big ring, and you're not in it. Okay, continuing through your comments, G33 says Penguin adds to 33 in Chaldean. Now, gematria is an interesting topic, and there's a whole new field that has come out of nowhere. I'm amazed at this stuff sometimes, where someone's like, hey, look, from the first Q drop to the death of the Queen, which is like a Q drop, is 1,776 days. Or new corona, novel corona, pandemic, 3/11, 2020. Go 911 days later, and you have the new king. Like, these types of alignments are undeniable. There are many of these types of situations or events which are just perfectly coordinated, and when you put it all together, it can be overwhelming, and you might want to say, there's no way man could do this. That is the default explanation that people go into, is there's no way man could orchestrate things with such precision. And that's a good way to hide the man behind the curtain. That's a way to get, or to be mystified. That's the Wizard of Oz. He uses fear and special effects to keep people entranced so they don't pay attention to the inner workings and ultimately how fake it is. I mean, I remember as a kid, I remember being disappointed. When I first saw The Wizard of Oz, I liked J.R. Tolkien. I liked Gandalf. So I'm thinking wizard, power wizard. But no, The Wizard of Oz is faking it. His superpower is what? A balloon? Lying? But yeah, he had a balloon. Not impressive at all. The Witch, by contrast, was very, very impressive with her flying monkeys, her brooms, her magic. But anyway, my point is, of course, people get mystified by the show and they don't realize how fake it all is. And these numbers, to me, indicate that it's more precise than we would think, that they're better than we thought. That when we see these glitches in the matrix, it's not because I don't know if it's that they're incompetent. I'm not sure what it is, but we see these glitches. I don't think it's on purpose. I just think that this whole thing is so old and institutionalized that it shouldn't surprise us. Like Arthur C. Clarke said, any sufficiently developed technology is indistinguishable from magic. It's very easy to say, oh, it's magic or aliens or God. But again, I'm doing my best to demystify the phenomenon of predictive programming, because what it does is it points to the programmers. And I noticed that the common response in alt media is to take your eyes off the programmers and focus on the alternative program. Into the Break says, shout out to the Toto cult. G33 says, you missed the penguin equals 33 part. Yeah, the penguin, the order of the penguin is a thing. Have you heard of that? Admiral Byrd was part of it. you don't get to Antarctica until you cross the 69th south parallel or 60th south parallel. And when they got to that point, and you can find this whole article about it, this first person account of joining the Order of the Penguin, and Admiral Byrd was one of them. Many people who look into flat Earth will look at Admiral Byrd as someone who knew something. Well, he opened Masonic Lodge number 777 at the South Pole. What does that mean? Yeah, Gematria is old, and it's because all of the languages that we're looking at, it's not just the Hebrew, it's the runes. What you find with a lot of these magical languages or languages that have that are used in these mystic systems, their letters correlate with numbers. They're not separate or distinct. And what they do is they will take a word and find its numerical value, and then find connections between other words with similar numerical values. Now, I don't consider this to be an objective, science or whatever, but what I can say unequivocally is that this is used as a form of cipher, and we are able to decipher many of their psychological operations through what you would call gematria. We're just reverse engineering it, and we're not limited to simply that. A lot of the times, you just have to figure out what they're conveying through the mechanism of religious syncretism. What does it mean when Rihanna shows her pregnant belly, dressed in red, surrounded by male dancers all in white? Was there significance to it? Well, yeah, the Super Bowl was a Mystery Babylon fertility rite, and the other side of that ritual was the Kendrick Lamar performance, where he was dressed as Christ, surrounded by female dancers all in red, and they covered him in blood. We see these things all the time, and what I'm pointing out here is that there's like a layer of symbolism that hides the truth that's actually in plain sight. And when I first started picking up on it, it was kind of startling. I was like, wow. The average moviegoer who's paying for their ticket and just sitting there watching a movie is not the target of some of this information. They wouldn't have the background in esoterica to put these things together. As far as like the target audience, you're going to watch a Jim Carrey movie. He's a slapstick comedian, but yet his movies contain the secrets of the universe, profound secrets of initiation, stuff that has always been guarded throughout history, but it's right there, central to the story. All right, going through your comments. This has been great. I'm going to send out the live stream notifications through the email, so go to ips.monster or infiniteplane.live. And I am going to use text alerts on some occasions. Thanks again for all the comments. And I'm working on updating the 24/7 so that when we go over to the replays, it's always something new, whether it's recent or a throwback. And I'm also going to be here in the office during the afternoons. Today I was really distracted putting together furniture, but we'll be spending our time increasingly in the voice chats. So again, if you want to join here. Into the Break says the average moviegoer is not getting their money's worth. That's wasted potential. Well, they're getting their programming downloaded. One more point on this. You go to the movie theater. You're inside of a black cube. And I think part of the programming is they get you into a hypnotic state. And it doesn't matter if you're cognizant of the programming. I think it just all bores into your neural pathways, whatever agenda they've got for the future. I think it works without your consent. I think it's eyes wide shut. That's the real meaning, I believe, behind Stanley Kubrick's movie's title. Your subconscious is eyes wide shut. Doesn't say anything, doesn't communicate back verbally, but it's always taking in. And that's where the programming occurs. All right, thanks again. We will be back, and I'm going to turn this back on over to the 24/7.
Seat. Shut up, shut the door. Government media bent you over like a whore. COVID-1984, shut in, shut up, cover your mouth. Soap opera dynasty bullshit. COVID-19 84. COVID-19 84. COVID-19 84. COVID-19 84. What?
She was sort of like a robo Greta before there was Greta, and it didn't really go over very well. I think Will Smith tried to make out with her. Jimmy Fallon made out with her. And they just touted this thing as this AI. This is what it looks like. That Sophia is awake, it's alive. And it's just basically a Muppet. But I think the illusion was being kind of brought together at that point, that if you could get some kind of artificially